Hi, this is Paul. It is difficult to keep up with all of the corners of the corner. New corners are springing up all the time.
Good to know. We're superhero names only on this stream. If you're coming into the chat with your real name, woe be unto thee. You know, this is a back alley for brigands and hooligans and ne'er do wells. This is not this is not the storefront of the TLC. These are the murky chambers in the deep. You know, we got away with PVK not finding out about us for a while. But now he's here. Now he knows that we do this.
Fleebless blew your cover.
And this is not this is not okay. Maybe I need to ban PVK, actually.
That's a little hard on YouTube. YouTube doesn't do that like Twitter. Anyway, there's a new station that's transmitting.
But, yeah. You know, maybe it is a good time to do a little you know how like radio stations at the like quarter of the hour or whatever though. It's actually it's 2:00. It's 2:00 on the dot. All right. Yeah, we gotta do the radio. You're enjoying a McMo stream. Welcome. Today I've got Joe Cross. Joe of the famous moniker Joe Cross. You may remember him from the comments. He's broken the fourth wall today, folks. Is one of his first attempts at breaking the fourth wall. And we're very grateful, thankful to have him on the McMo Saturday Cook-Up. You've caught us in the conversation portion of the show. Meanwhile, in the background, I've been making a beat, and you can see some of that going on right now, right here. Here we see, here beat, and I can play a little bit. Yeah. Here we go.
So I'm watching the evolution of this, and McMo obviously has been around in the corner for a while. I didn't know he was doing his own streaming. He did some serious streaming this weekend. So you look at these weekend streaming numbers. He had almost 5.5 hours on Saturday, 4 hours on Sunday. I first jumped on a little bit earlier with the Just Chatting and Chili Snow Beats that he was doing. The Sunday before, he had 4 hours, and the Saturday he had 3 hours. So McMo, I need a Gmail address because I'm putting together a calendar, and it's. Now, this obviously is not something that is easily curated for people to watch. And McMo, 106 subs, his channel's pretty tiny still, which I love because then you'll get little clusters of a few people. And so part of what happened on Saturday was some really good conversations about Christianity and violence, and the usual suspects were there. Luke was there. Michael Sartori was there, and I listened to a lot of this actually, and I thought McMo, this is really good. McMo is really good at this. Great timing, great, all of this stuff that he perhaps wasn't sufficiently appreciated in the megachurch that he got shown the door at, on full display here on his channel in just hosting these long live streams and people coming on and talking through their stuff. And what I'm going to do here today is, because I do this sometimes, especially when I spent a couple hours talking to a really Father Connor McDonough. I probably don't say his name right. I can't get the Irish right, but he's one of the guys that I'm going to talk to at in Galway for that event that Marcus put together in Galway, which is right before. I gotta really start promoting that thing. I am super excited about that Galway event. And so if you're making your way all the way over to London for ARC, it happens the Saturday before ARC begins in Galway, Ireland. So I'm flying to London and then quick hopping over to Dublin and then crossing over to Galway. And I'm going to be there with Martin Shaw and Paul Kingsnorth and Connor. Connor's going to be there. And this other guy that he mentioned sounds super cool. I am so excited about this event. I am so excited about seeing, more of Western Ireland and this location. I am super jazzed about the whole thing. But what I loved about this, Chad got on, and of course Chad is soon to be the father of a little girl, and he's processing that, and he's processing his his childhood, and what does it mean to grow up in a Christian home versus a not Christian home. And before, Luke was sort of riffing on Christians being a little too anxious about things and overcompensating sometime to get things wrong. But then I've participated in so many of these conversations, and part of what it strikes me is happening with these live streams that people can sort of jump in and jump out of. It reminds me of, let's say when I worked in a lumber yard. I'm loading trucks with someone, and we're just talking as we're loading a truck, doing blue collar work where we're working with our hands, but our mouths can talk, and we can, sometimes we just talk about whatever's going on. I mean, it was a lumber yard in New Jersey. I was in college, and some of the guys worked there all year, and I was basically summer help, and just just people sharing wisdom and growing from each other and finding friendship. And again, it's weird how this is happening on the internet, but the main thing is, of course, the relationship and the friendship. And I just deeply appreciate it. I've listened to snippets of this conversation on violence and parenting and children and sex ed and all of these issues in this clip that I'm about to play. And I'm gonna, just to give you a little bit of incentive, if you've never seen Chad's branding about his childhood, I'm going to put that at the end of it. And God has blessed so many people with little bits of wisdom, and so often what we have to do is just sort of put these pearls together and fit them together. And so I'm so excited by what I'm seeing in terms of people coming out of the lurk and coming on and talking to one another and sharing their thoughts. And these aren't experts, and people are grabbing little things from experts and doing things, but I'm just, I know in the middle of 9 hours of live stream that McMo was putting out on his channel with 100 subscribers, there's a lot of good stuff happening. So if you want to play and you got weekend time, see, some of us don't have weekend time. I don't have weekend time much, but some people do have more weekend time, often depending on wives' job schedules or whatever. Virtually not alone, baby. Virtually not alone. So watch it, jump in and check it out. Break that fourth wall.
Dad is actually still angry about this to this day. I recently found out that they basically sent a note home with us to the parents that basically was like, we're going to have this night. We're going to talk about deodorant and like your changing body and just like how to make sure you stay clean and stuff. And so my dad thought it was like a hygiene thing. And so for me as like a young teenage, I think I must have been in the 5th grade and I was already getting sweaty and stinky. So it was like, oh, this would be great. Ended up being a full-on birds and the bees, like scientific explanation of the whole thing. And it was a little, I had heard the word sex, and I knew that it had to do with like kissing and stuff, but I didn't, I had no clue the biological nature of it. And it really shook me. It like, I think I got into the truck with my dad and he was like, so do you have any questions? And I was like, so does that mean you and mom? And he was like, yep. And I was just silent for the rest of the ride home. He'd probably hate that I was telling that story. Sorry, Dad, if you ever see this.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So the story that I thought of or that I wanted to share, I heard on a podcast once, and I think it's related to parenting and shame and intentions and all this stuff. Because I heard a story once where to be careful that I'm not don't have young ears around, but of some kids that went to oh my God, there's so many stories like this. Like went to a sleepover, and they were young at the kind of age you guys are talking about. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly the details of what they were doing, but they were doing like something, but just testing boundaries, checking things out, confused, not really knowing what's going on, wanting to ask questions. They're just kids, learning to engage with the world. and a parent came home or saw something and projected onto it like a, I don't know, 40-year-old consciousness, or thought it was something way different than what it was, and they reacted in such a way that was really extreme, that actually created, like a central, this kind of internalized monster in this kid's consciousness that they were dealing with for decades because of like this intense overreaction by the parent. And I don't know, that I just remember that being so formative. Like that was so huge for me, because I'm sure my parents did similar things to that. Like I mean, what's so crazy is like, Mike, or you were using the example of going in the woods and porn in a Hustler magazine or whatever, which is a common experience for anyone who grew up before the internet. And I have no doubt that well-meaning parents can create problems within their kids related to pornography or anything. Pick the subject, trying to avoid it out of like some kind of puritanical sense. Like we create these problems that are just unbelievable, you know. It's a complicated issue, but yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I do think like, and that's even to say why, like, I get really nervous with the people that are like, return to tradition is the way and stuff, because like we actually do know like some ways are, you know, some things are like done better in like a new way, like, or whatever, or like speaking the way you speak about these things or stuff or whatever. Like the idea of trying to create like a LARP fantasy world in which your children will come out as these like uncracked eggs or whatever is a very bad idea.
Chad, welcome. What say you, sir?
Good morning, fellas. I'm eating some pizza.
Morning.
Saw you guys on my way home from the meeting, which was interestingly about sex. So that was cool. I was thinking about like a lot of these different kinds of topics. The thing that Luke just kind of said, so like when we were growing up, to watch like I was watching like RoboCop at like age 6. If anybody's ever seen RoboCop, it's like, oh my god, do you let your 6-year-old watch RoboCop? What is wrong with you? But then, like, there were a lot of other movies that we were watching that we should not have been watching, that were just like rated R films and stuff. And every time there was like a so-called love scene, which was like already began the distorted vision of what love is. But when there was like sex scenes, like my mom or would like cover our eyes, or like the stepdad or my mom's boyfriend would tell us to look away. And so it's like it already started this whole like crazy Garden of Eden, don't touch the apple thing, which like nowadays, like, so when I watch movies today or shows and there's like, let's just say same-sex kissing or things like that, like I get really cringy and it like makes me grossed out. But then I have to actually like ask, like I one time I realized, yeah, but I don't like watching any of those scenes, whether it's heterosexual or whatever. It always makes me uncomfortable. And yet I still had like this obsession with sex, and still probably to a degree have. And this is where I talk about kind of the spiritual molestation of us Westerners, like this kind of like really, well, because I wasn't raised in the church, so I wonder how many folks out there that were just raised in a like the non-churched secular frame, who also had parents that said, you know, talked about ideals like no sex until marriage, like all these like colliding ideals, and then like other ideals that we're asleep to, and all this stuff. And yeah, and so I was thinking recently, I'm talking so much.
Please continue.
I was thinking recently about how do I talk to my daughter about the upbringing that I had. Like, that's going to be hard. Like, when I really sit and think about, try to talk about our familial heritage, it's very, very hard to try to. And I talked with Anne about it, and she's like, well, that stuff will become, you'll be able to talk about those things in a timely manner. But even when the timely manner comes, like, how do I talk about the violence? Like, there was extreme violence, but there was no principled violence. So like, if you grow up in a house with like martial arts, there's some principles around that. So that's very violent, and yet there's like some good principles that help with other things outside of the violence itself. But like, the violence that I grew up around was like, that guy looked at me wrong, and so I'm going to road rage him until we stop him, pull him over, take him out of his car, and beat the shit out of him, while my girlfriend's sons are sitting in the back seat watching. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I grew up with. And so violence is so scary, dude. All this stuff, too much stuff.
Well, I think, I think, like, my own experience, like, I think I would have liked to have known more about like this stuff, because that was like, my dad tried to hide a lot of like stuff, and he was like, he was ashamed of a lot of stuff from his past that, he had participated in things like that. For me, I feel like it would have been helpful if I had a fuller context earlier on. I don't know. I mean, I can't like pinpoint an age, but definitely probably, by like adolescence or whatever, I would say. But I mean, the other thing is that like, kids do get a context for some of this stuff. And like, that's why even the sense of like teaching them not to like hit and bite is really important, because then you can just, at least you can say like, how you did this to your sister and it made her cry and that wasn't good. And it's happening right now, so I have to leave in a second. But but then, and then you could like, can you imagine like if that was even worse? And then you can see like, well, what is their imagination of like something worse than what they do understand? And then you can gauge whether or not that is a sufficient understanding for the moment, So I think that's part of the way of going with it. But and I think just hey, God will give you grace. If you do the wrong thing, he can make it right. And don't stress like that. I think that instinct of trying to like craft the perfect environment is probably more detrimental than the desire to be honest and and trust in God. All right, see you guys.
See ya. Yeah, I don't want to be able to have a perfect environment, but what I want to try to sidestep is propagating a kayfabe morality, where we act differently than the things that we preach, and then have no foundations for any of the things that we're preaching. And so that's what we grew up with, I think. We had Hollywood was our preachers. This pizza is so good, dude.
Yeah, just thinking, so much of this is like personal, right? And yeah, like Phoebus raises the point that your daughter is going to know you. So, he thinks it's going to be probably harder for you than it will be for her. That kind of, those family history stuff makes me think of some of the worst sides of my family history. Like, it was just told as stories. My family tells stories all the time. And so I don't remember how, I guess they did a good enough job of like not telling horrible stories before I could handle them. But I wasn't that old when I found out that my great grandfather, for instance, was an abusive alcoholic. Now the abuse, this is another thing. I mean, the violence and sex, this is the violence and sex stream, I guess now. But I remember my dad like being disgusted that the culture was okay with violence, but not with sexuality, that it was like, as like, that you could watch just regular TV and somebody's like brains would get blown out or something. And And as I'm thinking back to it was kind of weird how like the culture was like way quicker to offer violence, or it was okay with showing children violence. But sex was and still is hopefully not something that the culture okays exposing young children to.
Well, they
But
do in the commercials though, because like that's where you find, I think, most of the sex that you consume that's outside of pornography has to do with advertisements, and it's all snuck in there.
I think you're onto something there. But yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make was like telling it as a story. I think because even as a small child, like bad and horrible things get introduced to you primarily through stories, God willing,
Mm-hmm.
But because if you don't think about them through a story first, then you're not going to be like, that's when I feel like traumatization can happen in a way. It's like if it's something that you have no context for, if you've never heard any story about as a child, that's when it's like, what is this? That's when you encounter the aliens, right? Or the you have that kind of crazy encounter.
Like I don't think the fear around how to tell the stories has to do with delivering a clean cut story that, I don't think that's what I'm concerned about. The big concern is, how do I tell an honest story to my daughter without throwing her grandmother under the bus? Without destroying the ability for my daughter to grow a secure relationship with the rest of her family without looking at them askance. You know what I mean?
But Chad, I think even that. Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I think kids are just much less judgmental than we are. It's like you just.
What?
I think when a kid is young, I often think about that, and it's kind of like the story I told earlier of the parent overreacting to something. Kids are just, in a way, and although it's not fully mature in the kind of maturity or final participation that I think we're called to, where you become childlike, like become like little children. But I think you can only do that after your own kind of personal fall from grace. So like kids when they're little, they just absorb that stuff. Like those kids with the parents came back and overreacted for, or like even kids watching film. Like I think that guy maybe stopped doing it, but like Logos Made Flesh, he used to do those film reviews. And he said that his parents would show him all kinds of films. Like they were just pretty liberal with it. And he said, what's kind of amazing about kids is if they don't have the capacity, like there's tons of things that just wash over them, because they're not in the mind of highly critical, analyzing, fearful. They're just not as egoic as parents. I wouldn't even worry about it. You'll tell some story about your grandma that to you is horrific, and in a sense it is, and the kid will just hear it and they'll just be like, oh, silly grandma. Like, man, I love her. Like that's how kids are. They're awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially Nickelodeon.
Yes, it is a grace that kids are resilient. Phlebas with some surprising, kids love unconditionally, so they will love grandma until grandma actually violates them. Well, I thought that it started out good, but then the the end made it a little more bleak there.
Right. Well, and that's true. Part of it, right? Because I don't want to like I think that her grandmother is a lot different than my mother. In other words, it's the same person. It's just she's grown. So,
yeah.
How would it be morally ethical to kayfabe to Santa Claus my mom for my daughter?
I think so. I think that you show first the honor. You show, because you have to show your kids how to honor your mother and father, right? So I think that there is room for a little bit of kayfabe there. not telling her the worst of the worst, but also like I grew up with my dad and my grandma not necessarily getting along great. So it was kind of a, I got to watch my dad wrestle through that and just be like, yeah, your grandma can be a harsh lady, but she was a good mom. And he was, I could tell looking back, I can tell now looking back that he was actually wrestling with this himself.
Mm.
But like, I think that you said it already, is like that grandma's different than mom in a lot of ways. And, praise God for that. So,
yeah.
That story of redemption will hopefully be a story that you get real good at telling your kids.
Yeah. No, what's weird is I would have never guessed that this would be something that would ever cross my mind. I never thought, wow, someday I'm going to have to tell stories about our family to my child. Like, that is the last thing I would ever thought. And then all of a sudden it's here, it's like, oh shit, I'm looking out 10, 15 years from now, like, like, yeah, and maybe there's a desire there to try to, I don't think it's bad to want to kind of have a game plan, but yeah.
Well, you have to, but it's all going to go out the window anyhow, probably. But
yeah,
it's like, it's funny because, Chad, I have a lot of similar stories to you. I mean, not all my stories are is like my family, my nuclear family right now is so much more chill and calm than my upbringing. Like, it's unbelievable. And like, I have stories. I tell kids stories about myself growing up, or about like my dad or whatever, that are crazy. Like, I have way more. My upbringing, like, it wasn't as crazy as somebody like JD Vance or something, but like, it was very much more in that line.
mm-hmm.
Like, that's how I grew up. And my kids they have no capacity to know what it's like. But like, even like me and my dad have had really difficult things. Like, some of the most traumatic things I've ever gone through were at the hands of my dad. And I loved that man, like, immensely.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids can't, I don't know. I want my kids to know all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys brought it up, because this has been on my mind, and I don't know where do we find this category of wisdom. And so I'm really grateful that we have a kind of a forum to do it in. Is forum right? Is it the right word? Because I think, well, I get the sense that us three on the screen, and then many of the folks in the chat, other than Paul Vanderclay, we don't have a very strong cultural heritage to draw from. And so here we are. We have to like start grab a shovel, start digging, and so it's really good to that we get to do this. And this is why I say this is a very delicate thing, and should be.
Oh, we lost Luke. That's how delicate it is, folks.
Thank God. Bye, Luke.
That's how delicate. Well, and I did want to agree with Phoebus here. Is like, I've yet to find and meet anybody whose parents did a better job than I think mine did.
Mm-hmm.
But it did not save me from existential dread, angst, suffering, hardship, pain, all of it at all.
Yeah,
and so,
right.
But I think it prepared me for it. But how prepared can you be? Sometimes that fall from grace is even more difficult than just starting out in the slums.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm the older I've gotten, the more I really I really take can find the value in some of the worst stuff, and which is really weird. And I know that's kind of an easy thing to throw out there. It might be whatever they say, a tripe. Is tripe the right word? Whatever.
Trite with a T.
Trite. It's a trite thing to say that, there's a lot of good out of the bad. But when I really do examine it, I think, wow, my father wasn't really around, but when he was 99% of the time, I think he was a good man, and there's shortcomings there and stuff. And then on the other side of that was like my mom's boyfriend, who later she married, who then later divorced. That whole thing was like a train wreck. And would I want my daughter to go through that? Hell no. However, like, there's an extreme masculinity that guy demonstrated for my brother and I. And I think when you're kind of immersed in an extreme situation like that, it's hard to really find in the moment to glean the good stuff there, but like, there, say please and thank you, and there are manners that were basically beat into us. But hey, man, we got manners.
Right. There's a way in which, no matter what happened, a human being seems to be able to always kind of look at all of it and say, yes, but, yes, it was horrible, but here's all of the good that came from it. Like that. And this is kind of like the opposite of cynicism, right? Like a cynic can always look at their life and say, yeah, but it wasn't as good as such and such. It's not as good as if only I had done this. If only I had done that. Like you can always kind of make that move, but that means the fact that you can make that move means that you can always make the move of, yeah, but what you meant for evil, God meant for good.
Mm-hmm.
You can always make the move of, though he slay me, yet I will praise him. So there's a way in which you can almost. And this is something Cal was talking about last weekend, is like, as soon as you have your baby girl, there's a way in which your whole life, like, you're going to be able to look back at your whole life as like worth it for the sake of her, right? Like, you're going to be able to say like, sure, I, was an alcoholic, sure, all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. But like, if that's what it took for this human being, your daughter, to come into the world, then it was worth it, right? And how many more of your lives would you live, once, for the sake of this girl already, and you haven't even met her yet? So yeah, I think you're going to be a great dad. And but yeah, I bring all that up because that's always going to be the job of the individual. It's like, I can't do that work for you to look at your entire life and say, man, if it led to this, then I'm thankful for it. I mean, I could say that, I just did, I guess. But like, each one has to kind of do that for his or her own life, I think, in some real way.
Absolutely. Yeah, like, it's kind of like when I'm at Detox and I'm we're doing our thing on Sundays where we go in there and we try to share a message. I'll usually find somebody in the room. I'll say, what's your name? They'll say, my name's McMo. And I say, all right, McMo, if I have this piece of paper, and let's say this just magically could work, where it says on this piece of paper, this magical piece of paper, that if you sign on this dotted line, you will have your life, you'll become sober, you'll become the most free that you've ever been. Life will get so good that you can hardly believe it. It gets so massive that you don't even have the imagination to imagine how big it's going to get. And let's say if you signed it and it actually worked, I would take this piece of paper and I would throw it away, because I'd be robbing you of your own experience, because that's what, there's no easy button there, so
Harsh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, and part of that is to be like,
they are in detox.
Nobody can do it for her. Yeah, but see, the problem with that is everything. No, I mean, else,
it's good that it's harsh, because they're not. It's not like they're. This isn't Scared Straight. It's like, no, you're at the bottom, brother. So there's no reason for me to make it sound nice or good or anything like that. Like, I'm just gonna give you the truth. Like, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody else in there, like the actual, generally speaking, the staff that's working there and getting paid to be there are not telling them that. They will not tell them those things. And so that's, but
that's not good.
I also describe myself as an optimist who speaks of optimism through pessimism. And I think that's God is so good and strange, man. Like, he did that for us. Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. He's saving souls every day in every way.
Amen. Amen, brother. What
Well-
you working? What else? What do you got going on this weekend?
Well, my wife got snowed out of work.
Oh,
I've been working on this little beat here. I might take a little potty break if you're okay with it,
Yeah.
because I've been going for almost 2 hours now, which I'm still stoked to keep going. I got a little beat here. You know, we want to make it maybe better than a little better than a beat here. You know, we want to make it to maybe a full song, but I'm gonna play this while I take a potty break.
All right.
And then I will come as soon as I'm done pottying. I will come back.
Sounds good.
But
And I'm gonna mute and play my guitar and see what happens.
Perfecto.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a messiah complex. A messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. The hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers, see what I say, just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.